Welcome back to the continuation of our first demonstration on high-waisted skirt. So now I am going to show you how to pattern a facing. The facing is meant to give the skirt or the garment a clean finish around the raw edge of the garment. So I have here just a smaller sheet of paper, and this is my initial draft. And I'm going to place my straight line lined up with the straight line of my draft. I'm just going to match that up. If you do not have clear paper, I would suggest that you fold your pattern and place it on top of the sheet you will be pulling your pattern from. Right here, I have a tracing wheel. I am going to trace along my seam allowance. Trace along my seam allowance. If you do not have a tracing wheel, but you have maybe a push pin or an awl like this, you can use that to just make a series of puncture marks to show where that outline is. Okay. Now, once you trace your waistline seam allowance, you trace your side seam. Again, it's just a section of it. You want to go ahead and trace out the length or the depth of that facing. So I am going to mark out about 2 inches. Use a pencil. Actually, I'm going to mark out about 3 inches, okay, which is only about 1/2 inch from my waist level. Okay, and this one, there's really no hard math about it. And then 1/2 inch below my waist level at the side seam. Okay, so I measured 3 inches down at center front, and at the side I did only 2.5 inches, and I connected those 2 points. Now I am going to trace that with my tracing wheel and go across. I am also going to mark my darts, the widest points of my darts, as well as the point where my darts end at the edge of the skirt. Okay. So once those points have been figured out, you're just going to pull your sheet from underneath it. Now it's all perforated, so you probably can't see clearly what I have done. So I'm going to pencil it in so that you see what those marks are and what I'm going to do with it. And at this point, I'm sure you'll understand exactly what just happened. And again, these are just called drafts, okay? So your finished pattern would be much neater and won't have all these extra markings on them, okay? Okay, so there you have it. That is just a trace section of the upper part of my skirt. So what I'm going to do next is close those darts. So I'm going to cut out the shape of my facing. And let me identify this as your center front. Okay, so this piece right here is my facing. But with a piece that is so small, you don't want to go through the hassle of having to sew the darts on the skirt and then also sew them in the facing. So what I'm going to do is close the darts in my facing, okay? And that is also a very simple task. I am going to cut just one dart. So my pieces are now separated, and I'm going to bring them back together, bringing each line to the other and taping that down and in place. I'm going to repeat that to the other dart. And you are going to notice that the shape of the waist facing is going to start to change. And the reason is because you're now closing the dart and it is taking the form of what the true body would look like. So that is now the facing piece for this skirt. So you can see how it's already curved over. Now to conclude this pattern, remember this already has all the seam allowances that your skirt has. So you don't have to go in and make another addition, okay? So I will just double up a sheet of paper here, place my facing lined up with the fold, center front lined up with the fold. And the next thing is just to cut that shape out. Once the shape is out, this becomes your full front facing. And then you go ahead and label it and notch it. So you want to notch your center front, as well as your seam allowance, your 1/2 inch seam allowance on the side seam. Proper labeling is required. And you also would go ahead and trace that exact piece and make your fusing pattern and label that in red. Okay, so this would be your facing, front facing. One piece circled. Make sure you remember to put your style number. And make sure you label fuse. Now to conclude your skirt pattern on your finished, I'm going to just take a section of this paper right here. Again, fold your sheet in half to get a full front. Place the center front of your skirt draft on the fold. Staple it in place. Or tape it in place, as the case might be here. And the next thing I'm going to do is cut out my entire pattern. So now I have cut out my draft from that, and you can see this is the part of the bodice and the darts that we do not need. So the next thing before we separate our pieces, again below here we have my folded piece. I'm going to go ahead and notch where my dart is going to start sewing at. Okay, so each dart should have those 2 notches to indicate where you have to sew from. They also will have your drill holes marked. Okay, both drill holes marked, also to show the widest point at which you will sew the dart. And then a 1/2 inch in or above your dart at the end. We also need a notch on the side seam to indicate how much should be sewn, and 1 center front notch as well to match the facing. Okay, you want a single notch at your hemline to indicate how much should be folded under to get a nice clean hem. Now once you have notched your darts, your side seam, your hem, and you've included all your drill holes, you are now free to take off the draft, separate it from your finished pattern, and there you have your full skirt. Okay.